Sarah Martinez gripped the wheels of her wheelchair as another contraction hit. She was 8 months pregnant and trying to get to her doctor's appointment on time. The autumn wind whipped through downtown as she rolled down the sidewalk, her long dark hair flying behind her. She had been in a wheelchair for 3 years now, ever since the car accident that changed everything. But Sarah never let it slow her down. She worked as a social worker, helping kids in foster care. Her husband, Marcus, always said she was the strongest person he knew. The crosswalk light turned green and Sarah began crossing the street. She was halfway across when she heard the screech of tires. A police car was speeding through the intersection, its sirens blaring. The officer behind the wheel was looking at his phone, not paying attention to the road ahead. Sarah tried to move, faster, but the wheelchair couldn't go quick enough. She waved her arms, trying to get the officer's attention. But it was too late. The police car clipped the side of her wheelchair, sending her tumbling onto the cold asphalt. Pain shot through her body as she hit the ground. Her hands instinctively went to her belly, protecting her unborn baby. People started gathering around, their voices mixing together in concern and shock. Someone was calling 911. Officer Jake Thompson got out of his car, his face red with anger, instead of concern. He was a big man with a short temper, known around the precinct for his harsh ways. He looked down at Sarah on the ground and shook his head. "Why weren't you paying attention?" he shouted at her. "You can't just roll into traffic like that." Sarah could barely speak through the pain. "I had the light," she whispered. The walk signal was on. But Officer Thompson wasn't listening. He was more worried about the dent in his police car than the injured woman in front of him. He pulled out his ticket book and started writing. "I'm giving you a citation for jaywalking and blocking traffic," he said coldly. A woman from the crowd stepped forward. "Are you serious? She's pregnant and hurt. You hit her." Officer Thompson glared at the woman. "Mind your own business. This lady was in the wrong place at the wrong time." Sarah felt tears rolling down her cheeks. Not from the physical pain, but from the humiliation. Here she was, lying on the ground after being hit by a police car, and the officer was blaming her. Her baby was kicking frantically inside her belly, and she was scared something might be wrong. An ambulance finally arrived, and the paramedics quickly examined Sarah. They were gentle and professional, very different from Officer Thompson. They carefully lifted her onto a stretcher and checked her vital signs. "Ma'am, we need to get you to the hospital right away," one of the paramedics said softly. "We need to make sure you and your baby are okay." As they loaded Sarah into the ambulance, Officer Thompson handed her the ticket. "Don't forget this," he said with a smirk. "Next time, watch where you're going." Sarah looked at the ticket through her tears. She couldn't believe what was happening. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was being treated like a criminal. The ambulance doors closed, and they rushed toward the hospital. At the hospital, doctors examined Sarah thoroughly. Her baby's heartbeat was strong, which was a relief, but she had bruises all over her body and a sprained wrist from the fall. The doctors wanted to keep her overnight for observation. Sarah called her husband Marcus from her hospital bed. She could barely get the words out through her crying. When she told him what happened, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "I'll be right there," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Sarah had never heard that tone from her husband before. Marcus was usually calm and gentle, always thinking before he acted. But something in his voice made her think that Officer Thompson had picked the wrong family to mess with. She closed her eyes and rubbed her belly, whispering to her baby that everything would be okay. But deep down, Sarah knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Marcus Martinez walked through the hospital doors with quick, determined steps. He was a tall man with kind eyes, but tonight those eyes held a fire that few people had ever seen. He had driven straight from work, still wearing his simple business suit that gave no hint of what he really did for a living. When he reached Sarah's room, his heart broke seeing her lying in the hospital bed, bruises covering her arms and her wrist wrapped in bandages. She looked so small and fragile, nothing like the strong woman who faced every challenge with a smile. "How are you feeling, baby?" Marcus asked softly, taking her hand in his. "I'm scared, Marcus," Sarah whispered. "Not just about what happened, but about what this means for our baby. What if something's wrong that the doctors can't see yet?" Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "The doctors said everything looks good. Our little one is strong, just like their mama." Sarah showed him the ticket Officer Thompson had given her. Marcus read it slowly, his jaw getting tighter with each word. Jaywalking, blocking traffic. The charges were completely false, and they both knew it. "Tell me exactly what happened," Marcus said, pulling up a chair beside her bed. Sarah told him everything. How she had the walk signal, how the officer was looking at his phone, how he blamed her for the accident and showed no concern for her condition. With each detail, Marcus felt his anger growing, but he kept his voice calm and supportive. "What was the officer's name?" Marcus asked. "Thompson. Jake Thompson, I think it said on his badge." Marcus nodded and pulled out his phone. "I need to make a few calls. Don't worry about anything right now except getting better." He stepped out into the hallway and dialed a number he knew by heart. His supervisor at the FBI answered on the second ring. "Marcus, it's pretty late. Everything okay?" "No, it's not," Marcus said, his voice steady but cold. "I need to talk to you about something personal, but it might become professional very quickly." Marcus explained what had happened to Sarah. His supervisor listened without interrupting, knowing Marcus well enough to understand that he wouldn't be calling unless it was serious. "I want to handle this the right way," Marcus continued. "But I also want to make sure this officer doesn't do this to anyone else. If he's willing to hit a pregnant woman in a wheelchair and then blame her for it, what else is he capable of?" "Send me everything you have," his supervisor said. "Names, badge numbers, hospital reports, witness information. I'll make some calls and see what we can find out about this Officer Thompson." After hanging up, Marcus made 2 more calls. The first was to a lawyer friend who specialized in police misconduct cases. The second was to his brother-in-law, who worked as a private investigator and could help gather witness statements from the scene. When Marcus returned to Sarah's room, she was staring out the window at the city lights. "I keep thinking about all the other people he might have treated like this," she said without turning around. "People who don't have anyone to fight for them. That's one of the things I love about you," Marcus said, sitting back down beside her. "Even after what you've been through today, you're thinking about others." "What did you find out?" Sarah asked. "I'm handling it," Marcus said simply. "But Sarah, I need to tell you something. This might get complicated, and Officer Thompson is going to find out soon enough anyway." Sarah turned to look at her husband, seeing something serious in his expression. "What do you mean?" Marcus took a deep breath. "You know I work for the government, but I've never told you exactly what I do. I'm a federal agent, Sarah. I work for the FBI." Sarah's eyes widened. In 5 years of marriage, Marcus had always been vague about his job, saying he worked in federal administration. She had never pushed him for details, trusting that he would tell her when he was ready. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked, not angry but surprised. "I wanted to keep you safe," Marcus explained. "The less you knew about my work, the safer you were. But now with what's happened, you need to know, because when we go after Officer Thompson, he's going to find out who I am." Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing this new information about her husband. "What exactly do you do for the FBI?" "I investigate police corruption," Marcus said. "Cops who abuse their power, departments that cover up misconduct, officers who think they're above the law." A small smile crossed Sarah's face despite everything. "So Officer Thompson picked the worst possible person to mess with." "He picked the wrong family," Marcus corrected. "This isn't just about my job, Sarah. This is about my wife and my child, and I'm going to make sure he faces the consequences for what he did today." Outside in the hospital parking lot, Officer Thompson was getting off his shift. He had forgotten about the incident with the wheelchair woman hours ago. To him, it was just another day, another person who needed to learn respect for law enforcement. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever. The next morning, Officer Jake Thompson walked into the police station feeling good about himself. He had stopped at his usual coffee shop and told the story of how he had to deal with some wheelchair woman who didn't watch where she was going. To him, It was just another example of how civilians didn't respect police officers. Thompson had been on the force for 12 years, and he had a reputation. Other officers knew to stay out of his way when he was in a bad mood. Citizens feared him, which was exactly how he liked it. He believed fear meant respect, and he demanded both. His sergeant, Mike Rodriguez, called him over as soon as he walked in. Rodriguez was a good cop, the kind who actually cared about serving the community. He had been hearing whispers about Thompson's behavior for months, but never had enough evidence to do anything about it. "Thompson, I need to talk to you about yesterday," Rodriguez said, closing his office door. "What about yesterday?" Thompson asked, genuinely confused. "The incident with the pregnant woman in the wheelchair. I've got 3 witness statements saying you hit her with your patrol car and then gave her a ticket for jaywalking." Thompson shrugged. "She was in the middle of the road. I was responding to a call with my sirens on. She should have moved." "Jake, she had the right of way. The witnesses all say the walk signal was on." "Witnesses don't know what they saw," Thompson replied. "People always want to blame the police. You know that, Sarge." Rodriguez stared at his officer, wondering how someone could be so cold about hitting a pregnant woman. "There's something else, Jake. I got a call from downtown this morning. Internal Affairs wants to see you." "Internal Affairs for what?" "The woman's husband filed a complaint. Apparently, he's got connections." Thompson laughed. "What kind of connections could some wheelchair lady's husband have?" "Probably knows a lawyer or something. Just go see IA, Jake, and maybe think about apologizing to that woman. This could get messy if you don't handle it right." An hour later, Thompson sat in the Internal Affairs office facing Detective Lisa Chen. She was known for being thorough and fair, but she didn't tolerate officers who abused their power. "Officer Thompson, tell me about your encounter with Sarah Martinez yesterday afternoon," Chen said, opening a thick file. Thompson told his version of the story, making it sound like Sarah had deliberately gotten in his way. He painted himself as the victim, forced to deal with a difficult civilian who didn't respect authority. Chen listened without interrupting, taking notes. When Thompson finished, she opened the file and pulled out several photographs. "These are photos from the scene," she said, sliding them across the table. "They show Mrs. Martinez lying in the crosswalk, with the walk signal clearly visible in the background, still green." Thompson looked at the photos, his confidence starting to waver. "Photos can be misleading. We also have security camera footage from 3 different businesses," Chen continued, "all showing you looking at your phone when you entered the intersection." "I was checking an important message related to police business," Thompson said, quickly. "Really?" "Because your phone records show you were browsing social media." Chen pulled out another document. "Officer Thompson, how long have you been using your personal phone while driving a patrol car?" Thompson's face was getting red. "I don't have to answer that." "Actually, you do. This is an official internal affairs investigation." Chen leaned forward. "But here's what's really interesting. Mrs. Martinez's husband came to see me this morning." "So? What's he going to do, sue the department?" Chen smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Officer Thompson, do you know what Marcus Martinez does for a living?" "Some desk job, probably. Why does it matter?" "He's a federal agent with the FBI. Specifically, he works in the unit that investigates police misconduct and corruption." The color drained from Thompson's face. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely scared. That's just a coincidence, is it? Because Agent Martinez has been very professional about this whole thing. He's following proper channels, filing the right paperwork, working with our department instead of just taking over the investigation himself. Chen stood up and walked to the window. "But here's what I think, Officer Thompson. I think Agent Martinez is being patient because he wants to see if we'll do the right thing. If we'll hold you accountable for what you did to his pregnant wife." "I was just doing my job," Thompson said weakly. "No, you were using your badge to avoid taking responsibility for your mistake. And now you've made it personal for someone who has the power and knowledge to make your life very difficult." Chen turned back to face Thompson. "I'm suspending you pending a full investigation. You'll turn in your badge and gun today. You can't do this. I have rights." "Yes, you do. The same rights you should have respected when you hit Mrs. Martinez. Chen opened the door. Oh, and Officer Thompson, Agent Martinez is waiting outside. He'd like to have a word with you. Thompson's hands were shaking as he walked out of the Internal Affairs office. In the hallway stood a man he recognized from the hospital the night before. Marcus Martinez looked calm and professional, but his eyes held the same intensity Thompson had seen in federal agents who had come to arrest criminals at the station. Officer Thompson, Marcus said politely, I think we need to talk. Thompson wanted to run, but his legs felt like concrete. He was used to being the one with all the power, the one people feared. Now he was face to face with someone who could destroy his career and possibly his freedom. I didn't know, Thompson stammered. I didn't know who you were. Marcus tilted, his head slightly. And that matters because? Thompson realized how stupid that sounded. He was basically admitting that he would have treated Sarah differently if he had known her husband was FBI. What I mean is, Thompson started, then stopped. There was nothing he could say that would make this better. Officer Thompson, Marcus said quietly, you hit my pregnant wife with your car, blamed her for your mistake, and showed no concern for her well-being or that of our unborn child. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? Thompson stood in the hallway, sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. Marcus Martinez waited patiently for an answer, but Thompson's mind was racing with fear and confusion. Look, Agent Martinez, Thompson finally said, trying to sound official. Maybe we can work something out here. You know how these things go. Sometimes accidents happen on the job. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Accidents? Yeah, you know. I was responding to a call. Your wife was in an unfortunate place. These things happen in police work. Officer Thompson, let me make sure I understand. You correctly, Marcus said, his voice eerily calm. You're suggesting that hitting a pregnant woman in a wheelchair, then blaming her for it, is just part of police work? Thompson realized he was digging himself deeper into trouble. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you think being a police officer gives you the right to hurt innocent people and face no consequences. Other officers walking through the hallway had started to notice the conversation. Some of them recognized Marcus from his visits to the station on FBI business, though they had no idea he was married to the woman Thompson had hit. Sergeant Rodriguez approached the two men. Is everything okay here? Everything's fine, Marcus replied. Officer Thompson and I are just discussing yesterday's incident involving my wife. Rodriguez's eyes widened. He had heard the FBI agent's name but hadn't connected it to the wheelchair incident until now. Agent Martinez, I want you to know that we're taking this very seriously. I appreciate that, Sergeant, but I'm more interested in what Officer Thompson has to say about his actions. Thompson felt trapped. He was used to having the support of other officers when citizens complained about his behavior. But now even his own sergeant was keeping his distance. I was doing my job, Thompson said, his voice getting louder. I don't care who you are or who you work for. I was responding to a call, and she was in the way. What call? Marcus asked quietly. What? What call were you responding to? I've reviewed your dispatch records from yesterday. You weren't assigned to any emergency calls during the time you hit my wife. Thompson's face went pale. He had lied about responding to a call, and now he was caught. There was a call on the radio. Officer Thompson, Marcus interrupted. I've been investigating police misconduct for 8 years. I know every trick, every excuse, every lie that officers use to justify bad behavior. Don't make this worse for yourself. By now, a small crowd of officers had gathered to watch the confrontation. Word was spreading quickly through the station that the FBI agent was married to the pregnant woman Thompson had hit. Detective Chen emerged from her office with a stack of papers. Officer Thompson, here are the formal charges being filed against you. Reckless driving, filing a false police report, abuse of power under color of law, and assault. Assault? Thompson shouted. I didn't assault anybody. You used your position as a police officer to intimidate and harm a civilian, Chen explained. That's assault under state and federal law. Marcus stepped closer to Thompson. You know, what the worst part is? My wife is still worried about you. What do you mean? She spent all night talking about how you might treat other people the same way. She's concerned about citizens who don't have someone to fight for them. Marcus shook his head. Even after what you did to her, she's thinking about protecting others from you. Thompson felt a strange emotion he hadn't experienced in years. Shame. For just a moment, he saw himself through Sarah's eyes and realized how cruel he had been. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by anger and self-pity. This is all because I gave her a ticket? You're destroying my career over a traffic ticket? No, Marcus said firmly. I'm holding you accountable for hitting a pregnant woman with your car, showing no remorse, and then trying to blame her for your mistake. The ticket was just the final insult. Captain Williams, the station commander, appeared at the end of the hallway. He had been briefed on the situation and was not happy. Thompson had been a problem for years, but now he had brought federal attention to the entire department. Thompson, in my office. Now, Williams commanded. As they walked toward the captain's office, Marcus called out, Officer Thompson. Thompson turned around reluctantly. My wife asked me to give you a message, Marcus said. She said to tell you that she forgives you, and she hopes you learn from this experience. Thompson stared at Marcus in disbelief. After everything he had done, the woman was offering forgiveness, she also said. Marcus continued, that forgiveness doesn't mean there shouldn't be consequences. She wants to make sure you never do this to anyone else's family. In Captain Williams' office, Thompson learned that his suspension was just the beginning. The FBI was opening their own investigation into his conduct. The district attorney was reviewing the case for criminal charges. And the Martinez family's lawyer was preparing a civil lawsuit. 12 years on the force, Williams said sadly, and you throw it all away because you couldn't admit you made a mistake. Captain, you know how it is out there. Citizens don't respect us anymore. We have to be tough. Williams looked at Thompson with disgust. Being tough doesn't mean being cruel, and it certainly doesn't mean hitting pregnant women with patrol cars. Thompson realized that his world was falling apart. Everything he had built his identity on, his badge, his authority, his power over others, was being taken away. But the worst part was the growing realization that maybe, just maybe, he deserved it. 3 weeks later, Jake Thompson sat in his small apartment staring at the pile of legal papers on his kitchen table. His badge was gone, his gun was taken away, and his future looked darker than he had ever imagined. The local newspaper had picked up the story, and now everyone in town knew what he had done. The headline read, Police officer suspended after hitting pregnant woman in wheelchair. Below that was a smaller headline, Victim's husband is FBI agent who investigates police. Misconduct. Thompson's phone had been ringing all morning. Reporters wanted interviews. Lawyers were offering their services, and his few remaining friends were asking questions he didn't want to answer. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah Martinez was recovering at home. The doctors had cleared her and the baby, but she still had nightmares about the accident. Marcus had taken time off work to care for her, and their house was filled with flowers and cards from friends and strangers who had heard their story. I saw the news report this morning, Sarah told Marcus as they sat together on their couch. They're saying Officer Thompson might go to prison. Marcus looked at his wife, seeing the conflicted emotions on her face. How do you feel about that? I don't know, Sarah admitted. Part of me thinks he deserves it, but another part of me feels sorry for him. His whole life is falling apart. Sarah, you have the kindest heart of anyone I know, but remember, this isn't just about what he did to you. My investigation found 6 other complaints against him in the past 2 years. Sarah's eyes widened. 6 other people? A homeless veteran he arrested for sleeping on a park bench. An elderly man he roughed up during a traffic stop. A teenage girl he intimidated when she asked for his badge number. Marcus took Sarah's hand. You weren't his first victim. You were just the one who had someone willing to fight back. That afternoon, Marcus met with Detective Chen and the FBI's regional supervisor, Agent Rebecca Torres. They were reviewing Thompson's complete record and building their case. It's worse than we thought, Agent Torres said, sliding a thick file across the conference table. Thompson has cost the city over $200,000 in lawsuit settlements in the past 5 years. How is he still on the street? Marcus asked. Politics, Chen replied bitterly. His uncle is a city councilman and his father-in-law is a retired police captain. Every time someone complained, it got buried or transferred to a different department. Agent Torres opened another file. But here's the interesting part. Since your wife's incident became public, 4 more people have come forward with complaints against Thompson. People who were afraid to speak up before. Marcus felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Justice was being served, but it had taken. His wife getting hurt before anyone listened to Thompson's other victims. What's the timeline looking like? Marcus asked. Criminal charges will be filed next week, Chen said. Assault, reckless endangerment, and federal civil rights violations. He's looking at 2 to 5 years in prison if convicted. Back at his apartment, Thompson was meeting with his lawyer, a public defender named James Walsh. Walsh was a good lawyer, but he was overwhelmed with cases and didn't have time to properly prepare for each one. Jake, I'm going to be honest with you, Walsh said. This case is almost impossible to win. We have witnesses, security footage, phone records, and your own admission that you gave Mrs. Martinez a ticket. So what are my options? Plea bargain. The prosecutor might accept a guilty plea in exchange for a lighter sentence. Thompson slammed his fist on the table. I'm not admitting guilt. I was doing my job. Walsh sighed. Jake, your job doesn't include hitting pregnant women with cars, and it definitely doesn't include blaming them for your mistakes. Everyone's against me because her husband is FBI. No, everyone's against you because you showed no remorse for hurting an innocent person. Walsh packed up his papers. Think about what I said. A plea deal might be your best option. After his lawyer left, Thompson walked to his window and looked out at the street below. For the first time in weeks, he really thought about what Sarah Martinez must have felt lying on that asphalt, scared for her baby, while he stood over her with a ticket book instead of helping her. He remembered her husband's words. She forgives you and hopes you learn from this experience. Thompson had spent his entire career believing that being feared made him a good cop. He had thought that showing any kindness or admitting any mistake was a sign of weakness. But now, facing the consequences of his actions, he was starting to understand something he had never considered before. Maybe real strength came from admitting when you were wrong. The next day, something unexpected happened. Thompson's doorbell rang, and when he opened it, he found Sarah Martinez sitting in her wheelchair on his front porch. Marcus stood beside her, his hand protectively on her shoulder. Mrs. Martinez, Thompson stammered. What are you doing here? I wanted to talk to you, Sarah said simply. May we come in? Thompson looked around his messy apartment, embarrassed. It's not really a good time. Please, Sarah said. I think we both need this conversation. Reluctantly, Thompson stepped aside and let them in. This was the last thing he had expected. A visit from the woman whose life he had turned upside down. Why are you here? Thompson asked, genuinely confused. Sarah looked at him with eyes full of compassion instead of anger. Because I think you're a human being who made a terrible mistake. And I think maybe, if we talk, we can both find some peace. Thompson felt tears forming in his eyes. In 12 years as a police officer, no victim had ever shown him such kindness. Thompson offered Sarah and Marcus seats in his living room, quickly moving newspapers and empty coffee cups out of the way. His apartment was small and dark, nothing like the warm, welcoming home the Martinez family shared. I don't understand why you're here, Thompson said again, settling into a chair across from them. After what I did to you. Sarah placed her hands on her belly, feeling the baby move inside her. Officer Thompson, can I ask you something? I guess. Do you have children? Thompson nodded slowly. A daughter, she's 15, lives with her. Mother in another state. When was the last time you saw her? Thompson was quiet for a moment. 2 years ago, she doesn't want to see me anymore. Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. This was not what they had expected to hear. Why doesn't she want to see you? Sarah asked gently. Thompson's shoulders slumped. Her mother says I'm too angry all the time. Says I scare people. He looked up at Sarah. Maybe she's right. Marcus spoke for the first time since entering the apartment. Officer Thompson, my wife didn't come here to make you feel worse. She came here because she believes people can change. I don't know if I can change, Thompson admitted. I've been angry for so long I don't remember how to be anything else. Sarah leaned forward in her wheelchair. What are you angry about? It was such a simple question, but Thompson found it impossible to answer at first. He had been carrying his anger for so many years that he had forgotten what started it. Everything, he finally said. My divorce, my job, people not respecting police officers anymore. I used to think I was making a difference, but now I feel like everyone hates us. Not everyone hates police officers, Sarah said. People hate officers who abuse their power. But there are good cops out there and people appreciate them. Like Sergeant Rodriguez, Marcus added. He's been trying to clean up the department for years. Officers like him are the reason people still have faith in law enforcement. Thompson thought about Rodriguez, who had always treated everyone with respect no matter who they were. Rodriguez tried to warn me about my attitude. I should have listened. It's not too late to listen now, Sarah said. Over the next hour, they talked about Thompson's career, his failed marriage, and his relationship with his daughter. For the first time in years, Thompson was honest about his failures instead of blaming everyone else. The night I hit you, Thompson said, his voice shaking, I went home and told my neighbor it was your fault. I actually believed that. I convinced myself that you were the problem. But you don't believe that anymore? Sarah asked. No. I've had 3 weeks to think about it. I know I was wrong. Thompson looked directly at Sarah. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did to you and your baby. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks, but they were tears of relief, not sadness. Thank you for saying that. Marcus watched the exchange with amazement. His wife's capacity for forgiveness continued to surprise him, even after 5 years of marriage. Mrs. Martinez, Thompson continued, your husband told me you were worried about my other victims, people who don't have anyone to fight for them. I'm worried about them, Sarah confirmed. There's a homeless veteran named Charlie. I arrested him for sleeping on a bench last winter. It was 20 degrees outside and he had nowhere else to go. Thompson's voice cracked. I put him in jail instead of helping him find a shelter. Where is he now? Marcus asked. I don't know. He disappeared after he got out of jail. I heard he might have frozen to death in February. Thompson buried his face in his hands. What kind of person does that? Sarah reached out and touched Thompson's arm. A person who forgot that his job was to protect and serve. 2 weeks later, Thompson appeared in court for his sentencing. He had accepted a plea deal that included jail time, community service, and mandatory anger management counseling. The courtroom was packed with other officers, community members, and reporters. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, Thompson stood up slowly. Your Honor, I want to apologize to Mrs. Martinez and her family for the pain I caused them. But I also want to apologize to the other people I've hurt during my career. I let my anger control me, and innocent people suffered because of it. He turned to look at Sarah, who was sitting in the front row with Marcus. Mrs. Martinez showed me more kindness than I deserved. She visited me when she could have just let the legal system handle everything. Because of her, I understand now that being a police officer should have been about helping people, not hurting them. The judge sentenced Thompson to 18 months in jail, followed by 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. It was a fair sentence, but Thompson knew the real work of changing his life was just beginning. After the sentencing, Sarah and Marcus walked out of the courthouse together. Reporters shouted questions at them, but they ignored the noise. Do you think he meant what he said in there? Marcus asked. I think he's starting to understand, Sarah replied. Whether he follows through is up to him now. 6 months later, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him David, which means beloved. When David was 2 weeks old, Sarah received a letter from the county jail. The letter was from Jake Thompson. He wrote about the anger management classes he was taking and the community service work he was planning to do when he got out. He wanted to work with homeless veterans, to try to make up for the harm he had caused people like Charlie. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "Mrs. Martinez, I know I can never undo what I did to you and your family, but I want you to know that your forgiveness gave me something I had lost years ago, hope. I hope that when I get out of prison, I can spend the rest of my life making sure no one else gets hurt the way you did." Sarah folded the letter carefully and placed it in David's baby book. Someday, when her son was old enough to understand, she would tell him this story. She would tell him about the day a police officer made a terrible mistake, and how sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is forgive someone who doesn't deserve it. Marcus found Sarah in the nursery, rocking their sleeping son. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "I'm thinking about second chances," Sarah replied, "and how sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need our compassion the most." "You're an amazing woman, Sarah Martinez," Marcus said, kissing the top of her head. "We're an amazing family," Sarah corrected, looking down at their son. "And we're going to raise this little boy to know the difference between justice and revenge, between strength and cruelty." A year later, Jake Thompson was released from prison. True to his word, he began working with a nonprofit organization that helped homeless veterans find housing and job training. He never became a police officer again, but he found a different way to serve his community. He sent Sarah and Marcus updates on his work, and they responded with encouragement and support. It wasn't a friendship exactly, but it was something neither of them had expected. A connection born from tragedy, but nurtured by forgiveness and the possibility of redemption. Thompson's daughter eventually agreed to see him again. Their relationship was still difficult, but she could see that her father was genuinely trying to become a better man. It would take time to rebuild the trust he had broken, but for the first time in years, Thompson had hope that it was possible. The incident that had started with such pain and anger became a story that the Martinez family would tell for generations. It became a reminder that even in the darkest moments, people have the power to choose compassion over hatred, understanding over judgment. Sarah often wondered what would have happened if she had responded to Thompson's cruelty with more cruelty, if Marcus had used his FBI connections to destroy Thompson's life completely, if they had chosen revenge instead of justice. But she knew in her heart that they had chosen the harder but better path. They had chosen to see Thompson as a human being who had lost his way, rather than a monster who deserved to be destroyed. And in doing so, they had given him the chance to find his way back to the person he was meant to be. As little David grew older, he would learn that his parents had faced a moment of terrible injustice and had responded with grace. He would learn that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting bad behavior or avoiding consequences. Instead, he would understand that forgiveness means believing that people can change, that redemption is possible, and that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is offer compassion to someone who has hurt you. The story of Sarah Martinez and Jake Thompson became more than just a tale of a police officer who abused his power and faced the consequences. It became a story about the transformative power of forgiveness, the importance of accountability, and the possibility that even the most hardened hearts can be softened by unexpected kindness. In the end, they all learned that true justice isn't about punishment alone. It's about creating the conditions for people to become better than they were before. And sometimes, that begins with a pregnant woman in a wheelchair who chooses to see the humanity in the person who hurt her.